Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions.
Hi, I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. In today's tutorial video, we're going to show you how to make a cockpit cushion. This cockpit cushion is an irregular cushion, and it has a wedge in the back because it's shaped a little bit. It's not a square in the back. And it also incorporates an internal hinge. And that hinge allows you to fold the cushion back so you can gain access to the hatch, but it also means that this cushion is easy to stow because it's half the size. So in this video, we're going to show you how to make it, and we're making it out of dry fast foam and a premium outdoor fabric that's available from Sailrite. Let's get started. The reason that you should consider DIY is the owner of this Oceanus 38.1 was quoted $5,000. That's no joke for a starboard and a port side folding cushion like this. That's kind of ridiculous. DIY, you can get this done for the materials and the foam, minus the labor, for less than $500. We're going to show you how to do it yourself and save money.
This tutorial is not covering a traditional rectangular shaped cushion. It is an irregularly shaped cushion with a wedge on the back side and also an incorporated hinge that allows it to fold up for easy storage or to gain access to a storage compartment. Because of those facts, we need to take careful measurements of the opening to determine the appropriate size of the cushion. We'll cover that now.
For this cockpit cushion, I used some painter's tape and I put it across here so we know exactly where we want the hinge to be, and we marked it. You can see we marked it here and here so we can get some measurements. And then we put some painter tape here, and I put an arrow where I want the cushion to basically stop and start, and back here. Now this tape goes perfectly up vertical, and if you notice here, there's a wedge. It's not straight up. And so instead of making a 90-degree vertical edge, we're going to have a wedge built into it. Now our foam is 3 inches. So what I did from the teak, I measured up 3 inches and put a mark here. And this is the exact back edge of the cushion. So at 3 inches, what is this measurement? As you can see, it is 1 inch. So at 3 inches, it's a 1-inch wedge. Here at the front, we have an arrow where the cushion's going to stop, and this wedge should be the same, about 1 inch. To make this cushion, it's important to take good measurements. We're going to mark from this corner to here and write that measurement down. Then we're going to measure from here all the way to that corner and write that measurement down, from that corner to that one, and then obviously from that one all the way to here. Now we also have a hatch here, and we've marked it here. So we'll measure from this corner to there and write that measurement down, from this corner to there and write that measurement down. Then we need a diagonal because this is not a rectangular cushion. So we're going to measure from this corner all the way to that corner and write down the diagonal. I like to use a soft tape measure for this, so I'm going to put it on my arrow, and then if I go to this arrow, you can see it's 18.25 inches. So I've got it right on the corner, and this is the diagonal measurement all the way to this corner, and we'll write that measurement down.
For the sake of time, we're not going to show measuring everything. Let's go to our paper where we wrote all the measurements down and talk about it.
This is a fairly complex cushion. It is not a square or a rectangle. It's irregular. So I have to have a diagonal. That's why we have it. We have the starboard side and we have the port side. We're going to be doing the port side. The measurement is 65.5 and 18.25, and the diagonal is 67. Our fold is not quite in the center. It's 30.5 to the fold here and 35 here. And we also, not only is it irregular, we have a wedge in the back side. So we have 3-inch foam and the wedge is 1 inch. So we're going to have a bottom plate when done of 18.25 and a top plate of 19.25. That's the wedge difference. This is the back side back here, so we're going to put a zipper in the back plate back here. There are actually going to be 2 back plates, one for this and one for that. So with these measurements in hand, we need to draw out our cushion on some pattern material, because it's really easier to do this on pattern material. We're going to draw it to the finished size, then we're going to add our allowances. So to do this, because it's an irregular, we're going to measure the front or the back edge here of 65.5, and then we're going to measure from here and make an arch to determine our diagonal. We'll show you how to do that next.
Since this cushion includes a wedge, folding hinge, and is irregularly shaped, we think it's easier to pattern than to simply measure and cut the fabric and foam to size, as we typically do in other cushion videos. So here we go with patterning.
Again, I highly recommend that you do this on pattern material when you have complicated cushions like that. When I do a diagonal or an irregular cushion, I like to be a couple inches from this edge and this edge. That way I can usually hit my diagonal correctly. We're going to mark it here, and I'm going to put a little T here indicating where we start. And if I remember right, I need to go 65.5, and we're going to do the same thing when we reach that measurement, which is right here. Now from here, the diagonal, you can see that it's this corner, so you may have to make sure that you do it right. We're going to have the diagonal come from this corner. So what I'll do is I'll take my flexible tape, and this one has a hole on the end, and I'm going to take my awl and we're going to poke it so that it's exactly on that mark, this end of the tape right there, and do this on a sacrificial table. You wouldn't want to do it on a good table. And then this diagonal is 67 inches, so I come over here and about 18.25 will put it someplace in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my marker on 67 because that's our diagonal, and I'm just going to do this to make our arch. Okay, that should be good enough for this. Now I'm going to take my clear acrylic ruler from this edge and come up to our 18.25. So right there on this corner, and 18.25 is right there, the intersection of the arch, right there. So I'm just going to draw that line while I have this clear acrylic ruler here. This is this side of the cushion. So now I'm going to take my straight edge, and I'm going to put the 1 inch right on that mark over here where they intersect. And then I'm going to take this diagonal tape and come up to find the 18.25. So 18.25, and this is the 65 and a half. So there's where they intersect because I'm along this bottom edge. But I need to make sure that this is on that mark, because usually when you move it, it moves. It's actually pretty good. Right there, we're on the mark, so we're using this bottom edge. Let's check again. You need to move it a little bit over like that. So there's 18.25 and 65, and I'm going to put a little dot right there. Okay, you probably can't see that, but that's what I've done. So here's where our mark starts. So I'm going to just strike a line, because it's on the mark on the other side, across here with my marker on the pattern material, right to that one. And then I've got that. Now I'm going to just strike a line from here to this junction. And this is our pattern for our finished size cushion. And now our pattern is drawn. This is the finished size. We need to add allowances next. So if I'm looking at my drawing, I can see this is the back side. So this is where the zipper will be installed. So I like to mark outside of our pattern back. Okay, so now what we marked is basically the bottom plate. It's the exact finished size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark close to this line, bottom plate, finished size. Okay, but we have to do a wedge. And remember, our top plate is 19.25, so that's an extra inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my clear acrylic ruler, and I'm going to place it on that line. These are our finished sizes, no allowances yet. And we're going to strike a line that's 1 inch outside that other line, and we're going to go all the way across the other side, and this is going to be our top plate, oops, P-L-A-T-E, finish size. Okay, and then what we'll do here is we'll just follow this line down by using the clear acrylic ruler to extend it. So it goes down like that. So let's continue this line all the way across and we'll show you what's next. I'm going to put my straight edge on this line here at the beginning and determine where a hinge goes. Ours is not centered, so it's 30.5, which is right here. And I'm going to measure over here 30.5 as well, following that line. .5 is here. And then all I'm going to do is intersect that line with a line like this, and we're going to go through both the top plate and the bottom plate. So right like this, right through that.
It's time to add for the allowances in seaming and etc.
We're going to concentrate on the top plate, which is a little bit bigger because of the wedge. The allowances that you need to add to the top plate are 1 inch wider than the length of the cushion. So add 1 inch. So we're going to add a 1/2 inch on one side and a 1/2 inch on the other. For the depth or the width, it's a 1/2 inch. So we're going to add a 1/4 inch to the front side and a 1/4 inch to the back side. So let's do that next. So this is my top plate, and I need to add 0.25 here for the width or the depth, 0.25 here, and here a 1/2 inch, because this is 1 inch. So a 1/2 inch here, and then on the other end, 1/2 inch there. So I'm going to use the clear acrylic ruler. I'm going to place it on the 1/4 inch mark and strike a new line down here. And then I'm going to just run this line down. Okay, and we'll extend that all the way down the end eventually. But let's just put the 1/2 inch here. So now I'm on the 1/2 inch line, and I run a line here. And then up here, the 1/4 inch. And then we'll run this line all the way down. We'll not show that. So now let's mark this, because we don't want to get confused. So I'm going to just intersect that here. This is going to be the top plate cut. And the same thing here, top plate cut, and you can put an arrow to indicate that. Now the bottom plate, the rule is that it's basically the same size as the top plate, except for it's going to be cut in the center where the hinge is. But it needs to have a 1/2 inch added to the left side of that fold or hinge and to the right side. So that's what we're going to mark on the pattern material. Now let's talk about the bottom plate, because it's 1 inch smaller. It needs to have a 1/4 inch added here as well. But the bottom plate, this 1/2 inch will work for that, and this 1/4 inch will work for the bottom plate here. So the only line I need to strike for the bottom plate is basically here at the finished size, a 1/4 inch bigger, and this will be the bottom plate cut line. And we'll do that all the way across here. And you might as well mark it, bottom plate cut. So I have my clear acrylic ruler on the 1/2 inch of the fold, and I'm just going to mark outside of it like that, and then a 1/2 inch over here on the left side, or the right, I don't care what size it is, basically left and right of the center fold. And we're going to label this. So this one would be cut all the way to there, and then this one is cut all the way to there for the bottom plate. So BP and BP.
The width of our fabric is not large enough to accommodate the length of our cushion, so we're going to sew 2 pieces together.
We've already built a starboard side folding cushion, and this is the port side. But we want the stripes, because this has a stripe, which complicates it even more, to be the same on the port side as the starboard. So what I do, this is my seam allowance right here, and this is my desired finished size. So all I do is I line that up so they're in line with each other. And then here are my stripes. So I'm going to just go like this. Those are lined up. And then I'm going to do it down here as well. So now, if I want those stripes to be the same, they will be. I'm going to cut this excess off, but I'm not cutting directly on my lines because I can use this pattern if you didn't build a second one for the starboard side, which we've already done. I could use it by flipping it or mirroring it. So, or if I wanted to build new cushions, I have this for the future. Here's our material, and you can see that the stripes, we want the stripes to go this way, and if you look at the pattern, it's not long enough. It's only 54 inches, or 56 I think it is. So what we have to do is we have to join panels together. So we're going to have to seam it in the middle.
This rather large cushion has stripes that are running along the depth of the cushion. The fabric's width is not large enough, so two panels will have to be seamed together to make up for that fact. We are using 100% solution dyed acrylic fabric from Sailrite for this cushion. To pick your fabric, visit the Sailrite website and shop for fabric. Narrow your search by selecting Fabric, Material, and Blends, and click on Acrylic 100%.
So I need to make sure I have plenty of fabric over here, and there's where my stripes should go. And I need just enough fabric to cover my allowances. So that means I'm going to cut a strip because I have to put a seam right in the middle where our hinge is for us. That's where you'd always want to seam it if you're doing a hinge cushion like this. So I'm going to make this a little bit oversized and just cut here so I can cut two panels out and sew them together. And then we can cut it to size when we have them sewn together. So I need to do this to a second panel in the same way. Now you can see I've used this for another cushion, but all I'm going to do is just basically cut two pieces in the same width out, and then we're going to sew them together. So a cut right here. So I want my pattern repeat to be the same when I sew these two together. So if I measure from a point, I'm just measuring from the center of this blue to the center of this blue, it's 3.75, which means 1.7 or I'm sorry, 1 7/8 is the half of that. So if I take this and I measure 1 7/8 from the middle, right there, this is my seam allowance for that, which is less than a ½ inch, but it's really, really close. So I'm going to do that here as well, 7/8, and I'm going to put a mark here. So this is going to be my seam allowance. So this is a 100% solution dyed acrylic fabric, very UV resistant. We carry several brands of it. I believe this is the marine grade Umbrella brand. I'm going to put 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery, which is an acrylic base glue, not a rubber base glue. So it's really important to get the good stuff because the rubber base yellows super fast. Peel off the backing, and I'm going to baste this panel directly to that edge, and when we sew slightly smaller than a ½ inch seam allowance, it should have the repeat be perfect. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine, we're going to sew on that line that we indicated earlier. I'm going to set my stitch length first off to about 4 millimeters. That's why I like to sew cushions like this. This is a marine grade fabric, but it still works well, so the reverse is about the same. So where's my mark? There's my mark, and if I lower my needle right there, that is where I want to sew. So I'm going to put my magnetic guide right there, and that'll give me, should give me perfect pattern matching. So I'm going to lower the foot. Now this fabric is oversized, so there's no reason to do any reversing. Just sew along this edge. So this is going to be where our hinge is, and I like to baste the seam allowance to one side because that will be our center. Our top stitch will be our exact center. So I just put basting tape on the seam allowance that we just sewed by, and I will, let's see, we'll peel this seam stick off, but first I'm going to crease it to that side that the seam stick's on, which is on this side. So I like to actually just kind of splay it open and lay that seam allowance. I'm going that way with the seam allowance. And then I like to crease it well so it's splayed out beautifully. Sometimes using the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler just makes it crease beautifully too. Then I'll open it up, peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and refold it, and then stick it down. Now this isn't permanent, but it does keep it all to one side.
Now we can cut the top plate to the correct size that we need for our project.
Okay, so now let's talk about the center. I'm gonna get my pen, and this is our preliminary stitch. Our top stitch is gonna go right about here, which is about an 1/8 inch or a 1/16 inch away from our first stitch. So I mark it there with a pretty heavy line. This is probably gonna be cut off, but that's my center. This is the center of my hinge, that line in the middle, and there's our top stitch. Now, I put the top stitch on this side because when I line this up, see the center line's on the top stitch, and then my marks are lined up perfectly. If they weren't, just flip your fabric. That's what I did. And so because it's perfect, and I've also put a mark down here to determine where that top stitch is falling next to that seam allowance, I can line up my fabric to that because my lines are actually parallel to the edge. They're not parallel to the front because nobody's going to see that. So now everything is within my allowances. So I have everything exactly where I want it. I'm going to put the weighted sandbags on to make sure that nothing moves. Now look at this. Good thing I cut my fabric fairly wide because if you have an irregular cushion, you want to make sure you cut enough width because I've got plenty here, but if I come down here, I just hit it perfectly. So when you cut that strip to join them together, if it's irregular, cut it oversized. We are in good shape. So my top plate cut and my top plate cut. So all I need to do is just lift this up, and I put a little mark there, and I put a little bit of a mark there. So that corner is marked. Come up here, do the same thing. I'm gonna put a line there. You can lift this up, and you can put a line there, and then confirm that it's correct, and it is. And we'll do that to the other corners as well. Believe it or not, that's all we need for this pattern for right now. So I'm gonna move the pattern, and then all I'm gonna do is use a straight edge, and we are going to mark the lines. I'll do this one first since you guys can see it pretty well. So we're just gonna mark, and we are gonna cut with a hot knife to keep things from unraveling. Bam. And we'll do this all around the perimeter and show you what's next. Now that we have cut lines, I'm going to transfer my top stitch, which is pretty self-explanatory, but I want to make sure that you understand that is where our top stitch is going to go. I have the Sailrite tempered cutting glass that I put down on the table, and I'm going to use the Sailrite Edge hot knife, and this will just seal the edge. If you ever want to wash your cushions, or if you ever just don't want that unraveling, this is the optimal way to keep that from happening. So this seals the edge of this marine grade acrylic fabric. Look at that, beautiful. And we're going to do that on every one of the lines. Our material's now cut out. We marked back. This is the back side. So I'm going to just mark someplace down here in the seam allowance a big B. It's not very big, so it won't show up, but I know that's the back. I'll probably do it over here too.
Since this is a folding cushion, we'll need 2 bottom plates. We'll explain how to make those next.
This is cushion underlining material. It's inexpensive, a little bit on the sticky side, so it helps your cushion to stay stuck, hopefully. And you can see through it. It has little dinky holes, so great for breathability, especially when using dry fast foam. So we're putting it down, and this is our pattern. You could also use decorative fabric if you'd like, but these cushions are not flippable since they're irregular cushions. And we'll just position this. Now remember, we have to do 2 plates for this. Our pattern material is on, and I'm going to put a weighted sandbag on. I'm going to mark this corner because this corner is exactly the same as the top plate. But remember, has a wedge in it. So typically, if it didn't have a wedge, we would just mark it right here on this same corner that we marked before. But the bottom plate is 1 inch smaller. So with our seam allowances, that means we mark on this one right here. So I mark a line there, and I mark a line here. Okay, so that is our corner, which is right there. Yep. This middle is where our hinge is, but remember we marked it BP for back plate, and on this side it goes to this line. So that means that I need to mark it where that line is, which is right there, and over here, right here. Okay, and then we have to mark also this line as well, otherwise we won't know where to cut it. So that's the intersection, and this one right here. Should have marked it close to that one. So let's just do that real quick. Yep, perfect. And I'm also going to put a B on this to indicate that this is the bottom, and this is where the zipper will be sewn in as well. We just use a straight edge and mark a line from mark to mark for our first bottom plate. Now remember the side that you did, so you don't want to get confused and do the same side yet again. So we'll show you what we do after we cut this one out. Now this one we're going to cut with scissors. There's no reason to use a hot knife because this stuff doesn't really unravel. It has a vinyl coating on it. That's why we just use scissors for the bottom plate material. We did this side, so now we have to move it down and do this side in the exact same manner. We will not be showing that because the process is done exactly in the same way. So since we're doing this side, this is a BP, so it's this line here. So we need to mark it at this corner, there, and there. And don't get confused about the allowances for the top plate. You need to mark it right there.
To the bottom plates, we're going to have zippers installed near the back edge. We'll show you how to do that now.
These are our 2 bottom plates, and I marked them B for bottom. At the B for back edge, is what I should say. I'm going to mark up 2 inches because that's where I'm going to put the zipper in here. So I've got my clear acrylic ruler, and I'll strike a line at 2 inches up from the edge on both of these plates. We're going to mark this Z on both sides, and this is A, very close to the where we're going to cut, and we're going to mark this ZB on both sides so we don't get confused. And then we're going to cut it, both of them, right on that line. So we're going to cut the zipper inch or 2 longer than our panel, 1 for this one and 1 for this one. There we go. And then we're going to apply the 1/4 inch basting tape for seam stick on the side with the teeth. You can see the teeth are here. If you look on the underside, there are no teeth here. Now the principle that I'm going to show you requires that you use the number 5 Lenzip coil zipper, which is the perfect size for my concept. Now if you don't use that brand, I'm actually going to put it down an inch or so from this edge. If you don't use that brand, you're going to have to figure out your own concept for putting the zipper in and without stealing the size of your bottom plate. But this works perfect with this Lenzip number 5 coil zipper that you can get from Sailrite. So we want to put this double-sided tape on both sides of the flange with the zipper up, and I usually leave it about an inch away from the edge. And you want to put it very, very close, if not over the edge of the zipper, because you don't want this double-sided tape to show up. And we're going to put the zipper in so it has a beautiful finished look. Okay, before we base the zipper on, we have to know, is this the inside or the outside surface? And this is actually the inside surface. This is where the foam will rest. This will be the underside or the outside surface. So let's just put an in on this. Nobody's going to see this. This would be in, and then IN, IN. Okay, since this is the inside, outside surfaces have to face each other. The zipper teeth is the outside, and this is the outside. Because of that, we're going to put it on this side like that, okay? So we're going to peel off the double-sided tape for this one side only, because we're going to start with a small strip. It's always easier to start with it. And outside surfaces face each other, so this gets lined up perfectly with that edge. So baste it on just like this, and don't stretch the zipper or stretch the fabric as you put it on. Just put it on nice and gentle like that. And we're going to do the same thing with this one. So that means this is going to get removed, and we're going to put outside surfaces with the markings that we did like that, so they'll be up. We're going to grab ZB and ZA and take it to the machine. So here's our zipper, and it's basted to this, and we put it to this side of the presser foot, and we want to sew very, very close to that zipper. This foot needs to be right beside that zipper's teeth, and we need the needle to be in the left position. And for those of you that don't have an ultra-feed sewing machine, let's put the needle down just so you have a measurement. So from the teeth, basically that puts our stitch at 1/4 inch from the teeth. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning, and then I'm going to hold down here so that the teeth are pushed up against that foot. That's very important to keep this general size that we need, but you don't want to sew over the teeth either. One way I can tell that I'm not walking over the teeth is, I'm going to use this as a pointer, is that you can see I judge where my fabric is being fed, and it's right up against the right side of the center foot. So I know I'm perfect. When I get to the end, I'll do a little bit of reversing. And now we've got this sewn on, and we're going to take it back and we're going to sew it through again with the top stitch. So this creates a nice, beautiful finished fold. And sometimes what I do is I actually will crease it open. So let's show you. So I'll take it and I'll just use the edge of a sharp table to kind of fold it, pre-fold it, so that everything wants to fall on that stitch that we just created. I'll show you how we sew it after I'm done doing this. Okay, so now I can put this in the machine, and we're going to do a top stitch. And I'm going to put the needle in the center position and do a teeny bit of reversing here. And now that we have it splayed open like this, pretty easy. We obviously did the same thing with this one, so now we take it back over to the table. Now you'll naturally think that it goes on like this, but it doesn't. It needs to go on like this. And how can I tell that? Well, if you remembered, we marked B towards the center seam. So if you flip this one over like that too, there's a B there too. So with it flipped like this, so that this is over here, this would go on like this. So what you want to do is you want to peel this off, because remember, outside surfaces face each other. And you want to line this up. Now this is an irregular cushion, so it may not line up over here, but it should line up right directly across from it right there. So I'm going to start by basting this. I'm trying to do this and keeping my hands out of the way, which is very difficult. Like that. So see, it's lined up. And we're going to baste this on in the exact same manner that we did before. Okay, once that's basted on, we're going to sew this in the exact same manner that we did before, and look what it will come out with in the end. It's not sewn yet, but this will be folded like that, and you'll have a zipper beautifully in the back side of your cushion. Let's do the same thing with this one. Don't forget when you start that your needle's in the center position from doing the top stitch on the zipper before, and we're going to sew it on in exactly the same manner that we did before. So if you've done it right, you'll see in, B, B in the center, because that's kind of where we marked it, and you should have a zipper that looks like that. So now we're going to zip a slider on towards the center, and one on this end towards the center. So here's our slider, and obviously the puller has to be facing the direction of the teeth. I'm going to separate the teeth a little bit, and these are a locking slider. So the fat end goes on here like that. Oops. There we go. And you want to start these as evenly as possible. and I just push with my finger, this finger, until it clicks into position, bang, like that. I felt it, and then I just zip it in place. And we want this slider to be kind of in the center, right about there is good. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to do the exact same thing going that direction. Once the slider's in place, just cut the ends of the zipper so they're even on all of the edges, including the center. We cut two 3 by 3 inch squares out of some scrap cushion underlining material. I'm going to put double-sided tape on two of the opposite edges of them so that I can create a little hem, because we're going to create a pocket for the slider. So we just want to fold this over in equal amounts. I'm not measuring, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. So like that. And the same thing over here on this side. And we'll do the same thing to the second one. Then I'm going to put double-sided tape here. This is the raw edge. And I'm going to flip it and put it on the opposite raw edge here. And we'll do the same thing to this one. This is the side with the hems facing up. And we're going to take it and we're going to fold it so the hems are now on the inside. And fold it so the edges are flush. We're going to peel off this double-sided tape. And we want these to go towards the middle where our hinge is. So I'm going to flip this around so that now that hinge location is towards you, and I'm going to put it on just like this so the zipper is kind of centered in there, and then the slider will zip into this pocket. So we're going to do the same thing with this one at the center position, which means it goes right there. Okay, we're going to start sewing here. I'm going to do quite a bit of reversing and come over here, sew over here, and then do quite a bit of reversing. Don't sew that end shut. To do this, I'm going to put my needle in the right position to get it close to that raw edge. So here's where you got to make sure that it's not going to come undone, because if somebody puts fat fingers in there, not saying that I have fat fingers, obviously I do, and I'm going to pivot on that buried needle and make sure this stitch doesn't go a ½ inch inside this edge, because we want this stitch not to show up when we sew it to the boxing. Sew to this side, and the needle was coming up a little bit, and then I'll just sew down here and reverse. Okay, now we have a beautiful pocket, and even fat fingers can get in there, and we'll do the same thing to the second one. One of the things you should check is you should check to make sure that your allowances haven't changed. If you remember, I want a depth of 18¼ inches finished, and I added a ½ inch. So my cut size should be about 18¾ inches, which if I look down here, it is. So our allowances didn't change after we sewed in the zipper. If they did, you may have to make a new plate, or if they're too large, just cut it down in size.
We're going to cut boxing to size. We have stripes, so we have to be concerned about matching them up. To determine the width of boxing that you need to cut, if you're using Sailrite Premium, Standard, or Dry Fast foam, take your foam thickness and add a ½ inch. This is the width of the cut boxing.
This is my fabric that is obviously not been cut to size. We're going to use it for the boxing, and this is the top plate. The outside surface is facing up. Now, it'd be great if I could use it all the way to here, but there's not enough fabric, so I have to skip a line. And it's customary, usually when you're doing pattern matching, that you have to order 10 to 15 to 20% more fabric. So I want to match up the line here, and also up here, and then lay the fabric down flat and then put something on it. This is the forward edge, and I have all the lines matched up here. You can't do this with the back edge because there's a wedge, but you can with the forward edge. It's pretty easy. Just find the corner here, and I'm right on that white line. And you mark it there, and then you come over here to the center, and you mark it along this line here, and we're also going to mark where the top stitch is. I don't know if you can see that from over here, but there's the top stitch because we marked it, so I'm going to mark it there. Now that's not going to be our cut. We're actually going to move it a ½ inch outside of that top stitch area here. I'm going to label this as a bigger letter like G because I don't want to get it confused with anything else. And then I'm going to come inside here underneath here and label this G, hopefully in our seam allowance. That way I don't get confused about this. We're going to move this panel, and we are going to strike a line. So there's our mark here, and here's our line here. So that is our bottom edge. And we want to go a 1/2 inch outside of this line. So I'm going to use my clear acrylic ruler. And we know that this boxing is going to be 3.5 inches, and it needs to be parallel to that line. So I've got it perpendicular, I'm sorry. And it needs to be 1/2 inch outside the line. So right there, and I'm going to strike a line up 3.5 inches and just put a line there. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing here. This is 3.5 inches. So, and I'm on that white line, so I know where to cut. And now I'm just going to take this and we're going to mark it at 3.5 inches, which is right there. And we're going to strike a line because this is the width of our boxing that does not include a wedge. So our boxing is a 1/2 inch larger than the thickness of the foam, and our foam is 3 inches. Now we've got the tempered cutting glass on the bottom side, and we're just cutting it out with a hot knife so we get no unraveling. Tempered cutting glass, it makes it easy for the blade to slide on, and it also transfers all the heat to the fabric. We have that one cut. We're going to move it over, and we're going to do the same thing with this side. Ooh, we can, no we can't because it needs to be a 1/2 inch. So I got to go over one whole line, and we're going to mark it here and then go a 1/2 inch outside that for this one and make it 3.5 inches since this is the front edge as well, matching up the lines. Okay, this is the cushion that we've already finished, and we wanted to have the stripes line up on the next one for the port side. So this is our seam allowance, which means that there it is, so we can match it up. We have plenty of fabric this way. We do have to accommodate for this wedge over here, so that's why I left extra. So set that aside. Then we're going to take our plate.
When sewing the first cushion, we used a 1/2 inch for seam allowance. To match stripes from the first cushion, make a new mark a 1/2 inch from the mark for seam position. In doing this, the boxing stripes should fall in a similar position from the first cushion for the second.
So a 1/2 inch would put us right about there. So that means that that should be perpendicular. Let's just match it up to the edge so I don't have to cut it twice. There we go. Needs to be right there. Okay, and this needs to be right here, which is a 1/2 inch outside that mark, or about a 1/2 inch outside that mark. Then I need to take it and go up 3.5 inches. So from there, because that's the same width that we're doing, make sure it's perpendicular to the cut edge, or to the stripes, I should say. 3.5 inches here, 3.5 inches there, line struck across. Okay, we have a wedge at the back that is 1 inch. So if I put my clear acrylic ruler on that line here, I'm going to mark it to 1 inch. And then if I go like this to the corner, this is my wedge allowance right here. And this should include seam allowance as well. So we want the same thing on the opposite end of the cushion, so we're just going to repeat that. 3.5 inches, and we'll just follow this as a template so I can basically just cut it out a lot easier. So here and going across here, 3.5 inches, and I'm going to create a wedge there. So go over 1 inch, which is right here, and we'll do the same thing here. So we have one for one end and one for the other, and we're going to cut that out with our hot knife.
We know the width of the boxing for a vertical side, but what about a side that has a wedge? Well, that boxing width is different than the standard that we displayed here. If your cushion includes a wedge, as this one does, the width of the boxing only on the wedge edge changes. Why? Because of the angle. It becomes larger in width. To figure the width on the wedge side, we'll use the Pythagorean theorem. It is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A equals 3.5 inches for us, and B, our wedge, equals 1 inch. So our math is 3.5 times 3.5 equals 12.25. 1 times 1 equals 1. Those added together is 13.25, and the square root of 13.25 is 3.64. So for this wedge, we cut our boxing to 3.64. That's our C measurement.
Okay, so now we're doing the back edge here, has a B on it. And remember, at the seam allowance, we need to go a 1/2 inch outside of that, which I'm just eyeballing, which is right there. And we have the stripes all lined up, so we're just gonna mark this corner. And we know exactly, oh, and I need to mark it along this line so I know where this line is. And we can move this aside. So for the back, which includes a wedge, we have to use our calculations, which we've already done, and that is 3 5/8, slightly larger than 3 5/8. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to go right in the middle of that. I'll just put a little line there, and that is the height of our boxing to accommodate for the wedge. So that's the only difference with this back edge, is that we have to accommodate for that, and obviously we have to go a 1/2 inch past our top stitch. So we're going to label this one J, and we're going to put that in about the same spot here so that we don't get confused. So the last piece is back here. We haven't cut that one out. This is the back side. And I've lined up my stripes, and you can tell that I have a 1/2 inch going past that top stitch, so that's perfect. So here's where that will be, and if I go over here, this falls here, and again this is the wedge, so we're going to cut it to that little bit larger than 3 5/8 inch, and we'll mark it and cut it out with hot knife. So the center boxing that's going to include the wedge needs to be the same depth or width as the top plate. To figure the center boxing width, the cut size of it, this is where the middle of the cushion or where the hinge is. All you do is you take your regular boxing width, for us that's 3.5, subtract 1 inch, then you take that figure and you multiply it by 2, and you add 1 inch. And that's your cut width of the center boxing. So for us, it's 3.5 minus 1, 2.5, 2.5 times 2 plus 1, 6 inches for us. Okay, I want to find the center of my stripe here, which is right here. And we used our calculations to determine the width of our center boxing, which is 6 inches for us. So I'm going to make sure that I'm parallel to those lines, which is right there. And I'm going to mark this, and I'm going to mark where 6 inches falls here. And I might as well mark over here as well. Okay. And what was our, yeah, our width was 20. So this is basically the clear acrylic ruler size, which is perfect. So all I have to do is go up here and mark to 20, which is right there, to 20. And before I go away, I'm going to cut this out with a hot knife. You could have the stripes going this way. We opted to have the stripes go that way. It doesn't really matter. Size is what matters. So we'll cut this out, and this is the center boxing. Before we finish, I want to mark a line in the center with a marking tool, and this should be on the wrong side of the fabric. This fabric doesn't have a wrong side. It will once it's sewn together, but that's the center line, so we can easily sew a top stitch and pin it in the right spot. We'll show that in a later step. I forgot to label the wedge. This has a wedge, and that means I need to find the 1 inch, because remember our wedge is 1 inch, and I need to do that, and need to do that, and then I go to the center. The center is higher, and I strike a line here, and I strike a line here. And this will accommodate for the wedge at the back of our cushion. I'm going to hot knife those off.
Next up, we'll sew the boxing ends together.
We have everything laid out. Everything is in the right order. The wedge is to the back. This is the back edge. Wedge is to the back there. This wedge is to the back. So the first thing we want to do is we want to ignore this piece, and we want to concentrate on the boxing here, here, and here. And then we'll do the same thing on that side. So how does this boxing orientate? Well, this boxing, which is the right side and the wrong side, you can tell because this wedge matches the top plate, which is wider than the bottom plate. So that goes like that. Stripes match up here perfectly like this. Stripes are kind of your friend. So this is the outside surfaces, which means these two get sewn together like this. And then with this one, stripes should line up and the corners should line up, and they do. So that means that this is the outside surface here. So what I'm going to do, since now that we know the outside surfaces here and here, we're going to put double-sided tape on it. So that double-sided tape goes on the outside surface of that one. Double-sided tape goes on the outside surface of this one. Keep it close to the edge. Peel it off. And peel this one off. And now, remember, this is how it goes. So we're going to follow this wedge, which will put this one out on at an angle, but it should line up, the edges should be lined up. So it'll look like that. And then this one, outside surfaces, gets lined up like this. Okay? And we are going to sew those at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that's what it should look like. Let's go ahead and do the exact same thing to this one with double-sided tape, and then we'll show you how to sew them. We'll start with this wedge, which is a little bit strange because it goes up at an angle like that. Put my magnetic guide at a 1/2 inch on the needle plate of the Sailrite ultra-bead sewing machine. Make sure the needle is in the center position, so we are sewing a 1/2 inch from that edge. Lower the foot. Do a little bit of reversing here, going no deeper than about a 1/2 inch, but make sure you do reverse it well. It's the only stitch that's going to be holding it together at the corner. Okay, and we can just leave the foot down. I can bring this over. Since we basted it, it's pretty easy just to bring it over and sew the next one. So we're going to do these to both of our 3 assemblies, and we'll show you what's next. This is our center boxing with a line, and these are all positioned so the seam allowance is out. Seam allowance is out. That means these sides will be sewn down like that. Same thing here, seam allowance out. So this is outside surfaces facing each other, which means that it's going to be basted here. So I'm going to take this and lay them flat, and we're going to put our basting tape on these ends that are the outside surface of these pieces. Okay, and let's go ahead and do that with this as well. So there and there. Goes on like that. So the wedge has to go towards the back of the cushion, and we know that this is the back of the cushion because the wedge is also over here. So how do you do this? Well, what you do is this edge will be the bottom plate, and that edge has to be matched up to this corner of the wedge. So I'm going to peel off the transfer paper. The line is up, and I'm going to baste it, hopefully you can see that, so that it's flush there, which should mean that I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, or 1/2 inch allowance past the middle point, and I do. You can see that right there. So that's done like that. So now we take off this side, and we baste it so that this top edge, this is where the bottom plate's going to go, is flush with this corner. Okay, and we baste it along that edge, and it too should have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if you fold this up, this is what you should get at the middle junction, which is right there. Look at that. So it's basically a big butterfly. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Okay, so that's the wedge. Okay, so let's take this to the machine and sew it, but before we do that, let's mark at a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch here so we know exactly where to stop sewing. So I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to use that point, which I can see, and I'm going to put a mark right there, and then I can see it on this side, which should be directly opposite of the mark on the other side, right there. Okay, so now let's take it to the machine. Okay, we don't want to sew this flap in, so we're going to fold it basically out, but basically keep from sewing it on this side. So I'm going to start right here at a 1/2 inch from the edge, needles in center position. I'm going to do a little bit of reversing. And we're going to sew all the way. Notice this is splayed out like this, so I'm not going to sew through it, to that mark. Directly across from it, and then I'm going to reverse here. Okay, and then I'm going to take my needle out, lift my foot, and I'm going to push this going the other direction, like that. And we're going to start sewing at that mark directly across from it here too. So I'm going to lower my needle with my foot up. There we go. And we're going to sew in this manner, doing some reversing all the way to here and reverse here. Now let's cut our stitches and we'll show you what it looks like. Got to cut this one too. This is what it should look like. If this is your top plate and this is your boxing and this is your center, this is the wedge, should be flush here between the two, and this should be flush here between the two. So it'll look like a inverted, or a V is what I should say. Now we're going to do the same thing here. Now this has no wedge, so this is typically how it's usually done if you don't have a wedge. So you peel off the transfer paper, you match it up to this edge, it goes a 1/2 inch past that middle position, and then you do the same thing with this one. Peel off the transfer paper. Okay, and it goes flush to this edge, all the way to that 1/2 inch part. Then we're going to mark it at the 1/2 inch junction on this side and this side, and we'll take it to the machine and sew it in the same manner. Before we go any farther, everything is sewn together as far as boxing ends. So you should have seam allowances out, just like this. It should be a V here and a V here.
Now we'll join the boxing to the top plate.
So now I'm going to put basting tape on, so I'm going to move this aside, kind of keeping it in the general position. And we want to put basting tape around the entire perimeter of this top plate, not in the center. We're going to skip this. That's done as the last step. If you sew that down, you can't turn it right side out. 100% acrylic fabrics don't like to accept glue, so I use the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler to make sure that the double-sided tape sticks well. Now we're ready to baste. So we take our boxing And we need to make sure it's turned right again. We're going to start here at this corner. It doesn't matter really where you start, but we need to cut a relief notch going no deeper than a 1/2 inch on this side of the seam. So right there. We're going to peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue at this corner going both horizontally and vertically. And this edge should match up. In other words, it should match up with that edge, and your stripes are the most important thing, not really the edges. So I'm going to make sure the stripe is lined up here. You can't see it. This has no stripe that we're lining up, so what I'm going to do is pull this onto that edge there as tight as I can get it and walk it up the edge. When we get to this corner, we need to also cut a slit at the corner to allow it to take the turn, going no deeper than 1/2 inch again, right beside that stitch. Right there. Should do it. And walk this up and hopefully we'll land on the corner. If it doesn't, we can make modifications. It looks like it's landing on there pretty good. It doesn't have to be totally perfect. What has to be perfect is our stripes. So look here. So as I'm basting, I want to make sure that they line up. And you can shrink or stretch a fabric slightly if they don't, but everything looks like it's lining up perfectly, and that's what we want. Now when we're reaching this part here, we have to do the same thing. We're going to cut, but the stitch doesn't go all the way. We're going to cut right here, going no deeper than a 1/2 inch. If you imagine the stitch continuing, just do it there as well. Okay. So now we baste, lining up the marks as we go, the stripes. Look at that. It's just perfect. So let's keep doing this around the perimeter, and at each corner we'll make a slit just like we did. And if something doesn't line up a little bit, I'll show you how I shrink or stretch a fabric. And you can do it ever so softly, but it looks like everything's going to match up, so you may not get the opportunity to see that. You may be asking, well, hey, why don't these line up? Well, remember, this is an irregular cushion. If we do this, bam, we're straight. Same thing over here. So we have everything perfect, and I wasn't able to show stretching or shrinking because everything was perfect. So now we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to sew, but we're not going to sew this middle section. Okay, so this is sew and last. Let's go. It doesn't matter where you start sewing, you just have to start. So I'm just going to start right here, and I'm going to fold my fabric so it doesn't come apart. And we want to sew a 1/2 inch from the edge, which I believe is what we're on. Yeah. Okay, and I'm not going to do any reversing here because I'm just going to sew over my previous stitches. So we just want to keep that edge lined up. Now we're coming up to where the middle is. There's the middle. What we want to do is we want to lay this down, and there is some double-sided tape in there. I'm going to actually pull that apart and pull this double-sided tape out, and it's on a Mylar scrim, so it just comes out just like that. It's easy. And I'll splay this out like that, like a butterfly, and we will sew up to that. And then let's pull this out and we'll sew over that. That's all there is to it. We're coming to a corner. Before I get to that corner, I suggest that you pull out the double-sided tape that you used at the corners, and that's pretty easy to do. You just splay it out, and then you grab that double-sided tape. It's got a Mylar film, so it kind of just does this. It peels off. There we go. I stick it to the edge of the table, get it off my fingers, and that way I can flay this out like a butterfly when I get to that corner instead of having it go fold one way or the other. Is this entirely necessary. No, it's not, but it makes it look nice. Then I'm going to put my fingers inside and make sure I don't sew through this side, so I'm going to lay it out flat. I'm going to lay down that little butterfly. I'm going to sew into that seam, which I'm in right now, with needle coming up, lift my foot, pivot on that buried needle, roll the assembly around. I'm going to push this back so this almost becomes straight. This is the wedge size, I believe. That's why it's not perfectly straight. And that splays that out, lower my foot, and sew down this side. That's all there is to doing corners. Okay, we're coming up to the center here. And we actually slit it here. Probably didn't need to be slit there and here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to force this to lay down like that. And I'm not going to sew through this part right here, but I'm going to sew right past it in one fell swoop. So see how that just goes right through it? And that is done. Okay, we're coming to our previous stitches where we started. What we want to do is we want to run right into them and then go over them by a couple inches and do some reversing. And this plate is sewn on. So look at this corner here. This is a really nicely done corner. The fabric is splayed out, it turns beautifully. The inside's going to look gorgeous.
To that assembly, we'll be sewing on the bottom plates.
So I can tell that this is the wedge side, and this is the front, so this is the back side. So now I'm going to take my two plates and orientate them correctly so that the outside surfaces are facing each other. In should be up. They should be like that. And looks like it's going to fit perfectly. So now I'm going to take this plate, I'm going to leave it in place like I typically do, and I'm just going to flip it because we have to put double-sided tape all around the perimeter of this one. And I'm going to flip this one. And we have to put double-sided tape all around the perimeter of this one. So we're going to do that and we'll show you what's next. We're going to remove the basting tape at one of the corners from both corners like that. We're going to take this, we're not going to do this one right now, we're going to sew this one on first. So this goes over so outside surfaces face each other like that. Before we baste this down, I like to put on the Sailrite logo to show the world that you made it yourself. And you may be asking, well, why does that show the world that you made it yourself? Well, because we're synonymous for DIY. I'm going to put it just on the end. Here's the zipper. I don't want to put it in the front of the cushion, but there it should be noticeable if you're looking for it. Okay, so here we go at a corner, and I need to grab my scissors. And we need to do the exact same thing, is we need to cut a little slit here, going no deeper than a ½ inch, as close to that stitch as we can. There we go. And we will baste this. Now we have no stripes to match this time, so which is kind of a good thing and kind of a bad thing too, because you just don't know if your corners are going to line up. And we're going to go around and baste this on in the same manner. And I don't think you need to see much more about this. Remember, we're only going to do one of these plates at a time. That corner lined up perfectly, and we want to do this all the way around. It's basted from here all the way to here. Now to do this last one, what I do is I just fold this up, which gives us easy access to the last basting job. So now I can easily grab this and baste this part down. Now this does need to be sewn. The only thing that doesn't is this part here. So that's if we sewed this down to anything and then we couldn't turn it right side out. So now we just sew it all around the perimeter. Everything's basted, everything matched up perfectly. This is what it should look like on the bottom side. We're just going to start here. This is the center hinge. Anywhere. Again, the same process. No reversing. We're going to sew over those previous stitches in the same manner. So we're going to take out that double-sided tape from here. I didn't take it out over there, but we can do it there. There we go. And that way we can splay this open. Got tape stuck all over me. That goes down like that. Don't worry that it's a little bit off like that. Won't make much of a difference. I can feel that I'm not sewing through anything besides what I want to sew through. On top of the stitch, needle coming up. Lift the foot, roll this around, push this in, push it back so it's almost parallel to the where the needle location is, so I'm not sewing through anything I shouldn't be. Lower the foot, sew down this side. Do this all the way around. Okay, we're coming up to that zipper. You can see it right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse over the zipper to make sure that it's in there well, because it does come under some stress. So there we go. That's enough to take care of it. We've sewn this side on. The zipper's over here, so that's the back side. This is the front side. So all you do is you just do this and you start basting this down in the same manner. We're going to slit it there and baste it all around and then take it to the sewing machine and sew it in the same manner that we showed previously. I don't think we need to show this because the process is the same.
At the fold point or hinge, it's now time to sew that top stitch in place.
We're ready to turn it right side out, and we have to do this step, so just break the zipper open here, and then you can pull on the slider to open it all the way. Now, since we didn't sew this, all we have to do is put our hand in here, and I like to just go all the way to the back and pull it through to turn it right side out. I'm going to open up this side so that I can gain access to the corners as well. What you need to do is you need to push those corners out. And this is a marine grade fabric, so it's a little bit on the stiff side. But put your fingers in there, push, push, push. So you want to do that to every one of the corners, and that will help it to fill the corner. So here's where we're going to have the top stitch, which joins the center boxing to the top plate. So this is our center boxing piece. We want that stitch to be in the middle, and we also want that stitch to be right along this seam. Yours may not have a seam like this. You may just have raw fabric, but since we have the seam, we would need to sew it from this side because we want it to look good with the seam. So we lay this down, and you want to flatten it out as best as possible. And we have that mark in it. Remember that we put a mark on the underside in the middle? I'm going to use multi-use pins, and I'm going to basically go through the fabric and judge. Oh, look at that. That's our seam allowance, because our seam allowance is over there. If you look at the pin, that's pretty much exactly where I want that stitch. It's right beside that first stitch, and it's in our seam allowance. Now, what we need to do is look inside and see if it's on the center line that we drew. Amazing enough, it's right on that line that we struck that's on the inside. So that means this pin is good, and everything was nice and flat. So if I set this pin, it's on the wrong side, because this is the side that I want to have against the sewing machine. But I'm still going to basically run it through, and then I'll switch it to the other side. So I'm going to do what you normally do with pins and push it through like that. and that pin is in the right spot. Then I'm going to come down, make sure that my fabric is nice and flat, and I'm going to go over here, and I will be putting a pin in the middle as well, and we're going to try that same approach. The idea is that if it's in the wrong spot, you simply move it until it penetrates in the correct spot. So we just want to keep doing this and looking to make sure. See, I'm way off on this one, so I have to redo this one. We have 3 pins in place. I'm happy with the placement, but the pins are on the wrong side. I'm going to leave those pins in place. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to install pins on this side now that we have everything in position. So all I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm going to sew from this direction, so I want the ball to be facing me so that I can pull the pin as I approach it. So I'm going to put it where I'm going to sew, and I'm going to go through, and I'm going to pin it the opposite direction. And then we'll show you what's next. Now don't worry if the pins aren't completely straight. All we're doing is locking in the fabric. So see how that one's crooked? But it doesn't matter. We'll put one here and we'll put one here.
Why insert pins on the wrong side, then install them on the correct side? Well, that's because the fabric doesn't lay flat unless the top plate is facing the tabletop. That's why we insert pins there first. Then, when everything's locked in place, we install them on the correct side.
Now you need to roll this up because it won't fit on the arm of the sewing machine if you don't. So roll it all the way to your pins, and let's take it over. We're going to feed the rolled up part underneath the throat of the sewing machine, and we're going to lift the feed dog by rotating the balance wheel. And we're going to position this stitch probably right there so that the seam is right to the, the right side of the center foot. Needle's in center position. So we want to get close to this edge where we started sewing, and we're going to bury the needle by hand there. And we want to do some reversing, but everybody's going to see this, so you got to do this carefully and slowly. I'm also going to turn down the Worker Bee Power Pack system to minimal speed because I want to have full control. This has to look good. So now what I'm going to do, hold my trailing threads. Okay, I can let go of my trailing threads. I have 1 stitch, 2 stitches, and now I'm going to put the machine in reverse. I want to lock this down well. 1, 2, 3. I went 3 in reverse, and then I'm going to go forward. 1, 2, and back maybe. So just try to keep the stitches on top of themselves, but definitely reverse well. And we'll do that at the end as well. So now be careful and sew straight along this stitch, or that first stitch, to complete your top stitch and your fold in your cushion. When you reach the pin, you can go ahead and pull it out because the pin head is facing us like we designed it. If it's hard to pull out, use a tool. It's a little bit on the hard side to pull out. There we go. And keep sewing. So we're going to do this all the way till we reach the other end, and then we're going to reverse there as well. Here's our top stitch, reversed well there and reversed well here from the top side and from the bottom, and this is how the boxing works, like that. Beautiful. Now let's insert our foam.
We'll use our pattern and cut our foam to size and cut in the wedge.
We're going to be using Sailrite's Cushionrite Dry Fast Foam for this cushion. The nice thing about dry fast foam is that if it gets wet, which usually cushions that are outdoors do, it dries out quickly, especially if you're using a breathable fabric or if you're using a cushion underlining or something on the bottom side that allows it to breathe. Now there are other foams that you could use, but for a cockpit, Dry Fast is my top choice because it's going to get wet. You could use Cushionrite premium foam, and if it gets wet, it soaks up water like a sponge, but you can put a layer of silk film over that. The Cushionrite premium foam is a high density foam, so if you use it often, it won't bottom out
in probably 10 to 12 years. It lasts a long time. Then we have Sailrite standard foam, which is a medium density foam. And that foam is for occasional use applications because it will eventually bottom out if you use it heavily. So use that for occasional applications, like if you're using your cushions once a week. And then there's also a foam called Sailrite flotation foam, which is a closed cell foam. It's a little bit firm. In my opinion, it's not as comfortable, but it does float and it doesn't soak up water. So you can find your foam at Sailrite.
This is my pattern, and we have it on top of the foam that we're going to be using. The only thing that we have to do on the pattern is on the ends. Remember, we added a 1/2 inch here. What we need to do is we need to strike a line that's 1/4 inch from our finish line. Our finish line is here and here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the clear acrylic ruler on because we want the foam to be a 1/4 inch bigger around the entire perimeter. And we don't even take into consideration the fold or the center hinge in cutting the foam. So I'm going to mark this foam, and we need to do the same thing on the other side. So this is the back side, and that includes a 1 inch wedge. If you measure from the finished size, you can see there's our 1 inch, and we also added a 1/4 inch to that measurement. So that makes the foam 1/4 inch bigger. So all I have to do is line up that edge to the straight edge on the foam here, and we'll do that here all across the length of it. Let me get it in here. And I'll position that exactly. And then we know that we need to strike a line. I'm actually going to go inside because I like to cut with a little bit of a excess foam. So I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to mark right there, which is this line here, 1/4 inch outside. And we'll go do the same thing over there. So right on that foam line. And this goes up to here, and this is a 1/4 inch outside of our original thing. So basically I just need to do a mark there and there. So we're on this line and that line. So that's our corner. And then we need to do that over here at this corner, which is the middle line here and the top line here. Okay, now before you move everything, we need to mark the center. And this is actually the cut line for the center. So I'm going to put a line here, that's the middle line, and a line here on the foam there. From mark to mark, I'm going to use my marker, and I'm going to mark this. We're going to use a straight edge and mark from this mark all the way to this mark. I don't have my long straight edge. And then from this mark to this mark. And we're also going to mark the center. And we'll show you what's next. Okay, so we just marked our dry fast 3 inch foam. It's a 1/4 inch bigger here, 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 plus 1 inch for the wedge. It's not a 1/4 inch bigger here, it's just the middle. 1/4 inch bigger here as well. So if this is the large side, that means this is the top side of the foam. Now to do the wedge, we're actually going to cut a wedge in it, and that'll be done on the back side. So we'll basically just move the line in 1 inch, strike a line, and we'll show you how to cut that wedge. But first we need to cut this out with our foam cutter, or you can use an electric kitchen knife. That works well. We'll show you both. Using the Sailrite blade foam saw, you have a base with wheels that makes this cut almost perfectly vertical, and it works really well. It's just loud. With the turkey knife, I like to put weights on the foam to keep it in place, and I put the line over top of the edge of a table so that I can cut perfectly vertical, or as vertical as I possibly can. So I use the blade up against the edge of a sacrificial table and try to cut as best as possible. It does work, so don't feel like you have to buy a really expensive foam cutter. You can get away with something like that. That's pretty good. I put the pattern back on because I couldn't remember from yesterday which was the back. Here's the back. So, because it's an irregular shape. So I'm going to write back on this. Now this is where we have the extra inch here. So this will be the top side of our cushion. So I'm going to write T on this for top on both panels. And then we're going to flip this over. So the back side is still over here. And I'll flip this over too. Okay. So now we need to mark 1 inch over this edge, and I'm going to do that with the clear acrylic ruler. So all I'm doing now is just marking 1 inch from that edge for the wedge. Hey, that kind of rhymes, doesn't it? So I've lined it up to the edge of a sacrificial table, and I put some weighted sandbags on it. And I'm still going to use the Sailrite blade foam saw. I like to put the base up against here and actually hold on to the base. And all you got to do is keep that blade on that line. And watch this. That is beautiful. Now we'll do the same thing to this one.
The exciting part, and sometimes difficult, inserting the foam in the cushion cover.
We did sew on some webbing tabs with the fasteners that are used on this boat. That's a pretty easy process, but we're not going to show how to do that. So now it's time to insert the foam. Remember, the wedge gets put on so the top plate is larger. We marked a T for top, back, and putting in foam can be a little challenging, but it's like wrestling alligators. That's what we always say. Just start the corners, push it into your cover. Sometimes I roll it up to get it in, and then push it down into the corners. Roll the fabric around. Okay, once it's in, then you definitely have to massage it around and work the foam into the corners. Looks like it's not going to fit. It always looks like that, but it does. So I'm going to work this around, and you can also lay the seam allowance, since we didn't do a top stitch, on the top or on the boxing side instead of having it go willy-nilly across the entire width, and it makes it look better. That's not a rule, but you'll see what I mean when you make your first cushion, or if you've made several before, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to work this around, and it could take 5-10 minutes or so. Probably won't take 10 minutes, and then I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll put the other side in the same manner. Our foam is inserted. The last step is to zip it up. And here's the pocket that the slider rests into. Just zips right into there, and that protects the solid surface. Underside cushion underlining material. Front side is nice and square. We have a beautiful hinge. The cushion folds on that hinge. It's an irregular cushion, that's why it doesn't fold directly across from each other. It's designed that way. There's what our hinge looks like, so we can easily stow it. And if you look at the back side, you can see that wedge that we built into it. Now it looks like the foam can actually be worked a little bit more into this wedge, so I'm going to do that a little bit. All it takes is a little bit of massaging, and you'll get it nice.
Don't go away. Coming up next is a materials and tools list. We used 100% solution dyed acrylic awning fabric, or a marine grade can be used as well for cockpit cushions. However, if you want a softer hand, we recommend using 100% solution dyed upholstery fabric. Those fabrics are available at Sailrite. If you have any questions about the materials or tools that we used or this process, be sure to give us a call or email us. We're glad to help. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to be notified of new tutorial videos when they become available. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.